Hey, welcome to the Fan Answer Studio. Today I want to show you how to create this fall-inspired balloon garland and especially how to make these cute balloon pumpkins. The garland is made from 12 11-inch balloons in Pearl Peach, Pastel Green, and Clear. And I'm going to be inflating two different colors at the same time and inflating them anywhere between 6 and 10 inches in diameter. Once I've got them inflated, I'm going to press them against the table to make them nice and round and then tie them together into a pair by wrapping the nozzles around twice and tying them in a simple knot. Once all the balloons are tied into pairs, we can then join them into quads by overlapping two pairs so that the nozzles touch, and then twist one balloon from each pair around each other, locking them into a quad. I'm going to repeat this until I have 9 quads in all different color combinations. Then I'm going to tie those quads into a garland with an empty 260 balloon. Now you could always tie your balloons together with fishing line or curling ribbon, but I'm going to be using a 260 today. So take the very end of your 260 and tie it to one of the nozzles from your first quad, and that will be the center of our garland. Now I'm going to take my second quad and nestle it right up against the first, stretch that 260 tight, and wrap it in a figure pattern around 2 of the balloons in the new quad. Repeat these steps with each quad you add to the garland, always making sure that 260 balloon comes back to the center nozzles before adding the next quad. You also want to pay attention to the colors and sizes of balloons we're putting next to each other so we get a nice mix all the way across the garland. After tying in the last quad, take the remaining 260 tail and tie it to one of the nozzles in that final quad and tuck the tail out of sight. Now with the main body of our balloon garland complete, we can focus on creating the accents, the most important of which being our pumpkins. I'm creating a large pumpkin using a 17-inch coral balloon and 4 260 balloons in a coordinating color. Now I'm going to fully inflate that 17-inch balloon until it reaches its max size, and then slowly let the air out of it until it's about half its size. We need to have the balloon be really stretchy so we can compress it and make the indentions of the pumpkin. So once you get it to about half the size, you're going to tie a knot in the nozzle and then grab your first 260 balloon. Now I'm using pink 260s because I couldn't get a 260 in the coral color I'm using for the pumpkins, but just pick a color that's as close as possible to your pumpkin color. To make the pumpkin shape, I'm going to take the end of my 260 and pinch it against the nozzle of my 17-inch balloon, stretch that 260 tight, and wrap it under the balloon so it goes right across that center dimple, and then the tail end comes right back up to the nozzle. Then I'm going to stretch that 260 nice and tight and tie it in a double knot right next to the balloon nozzle. At the moment, our balloon looks like a peach, so I'm going to grab one more 260 and tie it just like we did the first 260, but this one's going to be perpendicular to the first. Pull that 260 tight and tie it in place, and now our balloon is looking like a gift package. It should be kind of square, and those two 260s should overlap right on the bottom. The next 260 will be placed right between 2 current 260s so we get an even bump between all of our 260 balloons. So once we get all 4 of our 260s tied in place, they should all intersect on the bottom side of the pumpkin, and we want to make sure that our 260s are laying nice and flat across the 17-inch balloon. Here you can see one is a little twisted. That won't change the shape of the balloon, but I think it looks a lot nicer when all the 260s are laying nice and flat. Once you get the final one tied in place, you'll notice that there's a lot of tails and nozzles all right at the top of the pumpkin. Don't cut these off because we'll use them as the base for creating the stem of our pumpkin by folding them up and wrapping them with a little bit of this brown packaging tape. So I'm going to fold my 260 tails over so that they're about the same size and height of the nozzle of my 17-inch balloon. Once I've gathered those all up in my fingers, I'm then going to take a couple inches of this brown packaging tape and stick all the nozzles right into the end of that tape and wrap it really tightly around all those nozzles, securing them in place. This first piece of tape doesn't have to be super pretty, we just want to get the general shape of the stem created. Then I'm going to come back with 1 or 2 more pieces of tape a little bit higher, and then I'm going to wrap this into a point at the top and then down around so it's touching the base of the balloon. Once you're satisfied with the size of the stem, we can then twist it to give it texture and bend the top over to give it a cute little pumpkin curl. With our large pumpkin complete, I also made a couple smaller pumpkins using 11-inch balloons that I deflated to about half their size, and I only used 2 260 balloons for this one. I wrap the 260 around the 11-inch balloon in the exact same way, but once you tie it, there's a lot of 260 tail left over. So while I hold that first tie right against the nozzle of the 11-inch balloon, I'm going to stretch the remaining tail around in a perpendicular direction so I get that gift package look, all from one balloon. The important thing is when you're doing two directions with one single 260 balloon is you just have to hold on to those nozzles so you don't accidentally pull it off center. The rest of the pumpkin making steps are all the same, so I made one large pumpkin and two tiny pumpkins to accent this garland. The final element we need to create are the pumpkin vines, and I'll be twisting 6 green 260s into curls to stick out of the garland. To make a curl, we need something to wrap our 260 balloons around, so I'm using a bit of PVC pipe in one of my spare balloon bases with a rubber band on top. First of all, we need to pre-stretch all of our 260 balloons, so fully inflate them so that the air goes all the way to the end, and then let all that air out. This will make inflating the curl much easier. Now I'm going to place the end of my 260 underneath the rubber band on my pipe so it just holds it in place. Then I'm going to wrap the 260 around the pipe, making sure the balloon is nice and flat against the pipe. If there are any twists in the balloon, air won't go past it and we'll have to redo our curl. Now I'm going to leave a couple inches of the balloon off the pipe so I can easily inflate the balloon with my hand pump. I'm going to fully inflate that 260, and when the air gets to the very end of the balloon, it'll pop itself free from the rubber band, so your end should be nice and rounded. If for some reason it doesn't come loose, you can always pull it free of the rubber band and put just a tiny bit more air in so you get a nice rounded end to our balloon. I'm going to let a tiny bit of air out of it so the 260 is not under so much pressure, and our curl is ready to go. Now if you'd like to change up the shape of your curl a little bit, you can pull on it, or by pressing outwards on the balloon with your thumbs, you can make a curl more distinct. Every curl we inflate is going to be a little different, and that just adds to the charm of our garland. To make a freestanding backdrop, I'm going to use this folding screen as the base for my balloon garland. I'm going to attach that garland using some giant binder clips that I've slipped onto the top two corners of my screen, and this gives me an anchor point to tie in my garland. I'll be securing the two together with some empty 260 balloons, and I'm just going to slip the end of my 260 through the handles of the clip, tie a double knot so it's nice and secure. Now if you wanted to attach your balloon garland to a wall, you would simply add command hooks to your wall and tie a 260 to each of those. Next, you're going to hold the garland up about where you want it, and then while you're holding that in place, grab the 260 we tied to that clip, pull it tight, and wrap it around a couple of balloons in the garland in a figure 8 pattern. This will be enough to hold it in place. Tie the other end of the garland in the exact same way, and now we can start adding our accents in. So I'm going to first add the large pumpkin on the left side of my garland near the bottom, and I'm going to visualize about where I want it, and then I'll secure it to the garland using that remaining 260 tail we used to tie the garland to the wall. So take that green 260 and wrap it under one of the pink 260s that's wrapped around our pumpkin, and then tie the end of the green 260 to one of the balloons back in the garland. This will be enough to hold the pumpkin in place, and it allows us to adjust how the pumpkin sits in the garland. By sliding that green balloon up and down the length of that pink 260 of the pumpkin, we can totally rotate our pumpkin until we're happy with how it sits. Next, I'm going to add my tiny pumpkins, and if you want to put your pumpkin somewhere where you can't necessarily tie a 260 and get it to sit exactly how you want, you can secure your pumpkin using some glue dashes. To do this, place the pumpkin about where you think you want it, and then anywhere the pumpkin touches a balloon in the garland, that's where you're going to place one of your glue dashes. So hold your finger in the spot where those two balloons are meeting, put your glue dash right in that spot, remove the paper backing, and stick the pumpkin back in place. Do this a couple times so you've got 2 to 3 connection points between the pumpkin and the balloons in the garland, and that'll hold it in place. Now you do want to be certain that this is exactly where you want the pumpkin and the balloons around it, because once we stick this in place, you really can't shimmy the balloons around to change up the formation. Once all the pumpkins are in place, we can then add our balloon curls. Now these are going to be coming out of the garland in lots of different directions, and that's going to give us volume and drama. So I'm going to take the nozzle end of each of these curls and slip it between some of the balloons in the garland. The tension between the balloons should be enough to hold these curls in place, but if you want to attach it somewhere where it's not wanting to particularly stay, you can always add a glue dash to make it stick exactly where you want it. As I add in all these curls, I want to make sure I'm evenly distributing them and the garland looks nice and balanced from a distance. It's easy to get caught up in the little details of our balloon designs, but always take a couple steps back when you're near the end to make sure all those individual elements come together into a cohesive, beautiful design. And now this charming pumpkin garland is ready for a party. If you enjoyed today's project, you should check out this video next. So until the next time I see you, remember, stay creative, everybody!